Good afternoon. My name is Amy McCreath, and I'm the coordinator of the Technology and Culture Forum at MIT and the Episcopal Chaplain at MIT, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to the talk this afternoon by Dr. Philip Zimbardo. The very first class that I enrolled in as an undergraduate was social psychology, and it didn't take very long for me to become very familiar with the name Philip Zimbardo, and I never thought that I would have the chance to introduce him years later here at MIT. It's a great, great honor. I'd like to, on behalf of Technology and Culture Forum, thank the other sponsors of this evening's talk. They are the Society for Terrorism Research and MIT's Leadership Center. Thank you to both of those groups for spreading the word and helping to make this happen. The Technology and Culture Forum at MIT has been around for over 40 years, and we try to get folks at MIT to look at the social responsibility of scientists and engineers. If you don't know much about our work, on your way out tonight, be sure to pick up this brochure, which is on a table outside this auditorium, where you can also purchase a copy of The Lucifer Effect. And we hope that you'll stop at that table and get one of those books. Dr. Zimbardo has agreed to stick around for a while and sign books. So if you purchase a book, you can come back inside, and he'll be down here to sign your book. Tonight's event all began a couple weeks ago when we got a phone call from Jared Koren, who's a professor at MIT's Sloan School of Management. And we're really glad that we were able to put it together with fairly short notice. Jared studied at Stanford University and became familiar with Dr. Zimbardo's work when he was a student there. And so now it's my pleasure to ask him to introduce Dr. Zimbardo to you tonight.
All right, good afternoon. I also want to thank Reverend Amy McCreath for making this event possible, and for the Technology and Culture Forum at MIT, and Patricia Weinman, who I'm not seeing, but who is behind many of the logistics to make this happen. And I also want to thank our co-sponsors, the MIT Leadership Center and the Society for Terrorism Research, for making this event possible. I think you'll notice soon that the subject matter of today's talk is highly relevant to the missions of these organizations that sponsored the talk. It's a great honor to introduce our speaker today, who has been an inspiration to me ever since my days as a doctoral student in the psychology department at Stanford University. And in those classes, he played the same kind of inspirational theme-related music before every class. Dr. Philip Zimbardo is one of the most internationally renowned social psychologists of our time. Former president of the American Psychological Association and two-time past president of the Western Psychological Association, Dr. Zimbardo has been a longtime leader of the psychology field. He has over 400 publications in diverse areas ranging from social influence to shyness to terrorism. As just one example of his many accolades, last year Dr. Zimbardo received the prestigious Havel Foundation Prize for, quote, his devotion to enhancing the human condition by liberating people from the prisons of evil, ignorance, and shyness through innovative research, teaching, and social action. Now, with a new book hot off the press, Dr. Zimbardo is taking a break from his media tour, which has included recent interviews on National Public Radio and on The Daily Show, to join us today here at MIT. I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Philip Zimbardo.
Is the mic on? Great. I want to thank Jared, and in honor of Passover, which starts at sunset, I'm going to wear something that actually, although it has Jewish start, it's from Indian. It's American Indian, because that was a symbol they used. And I'm excited to be here. This is on very short notice. I was in New York doing a media tour, John Staley and some other things, Democracy Now! With Amy Goodman. And I called Jared and said, hey, I'm here. It'd be nice to come up to Boston. And he helped arrange all of this in 2 weeks. So I hope to justify your faith coming on a grim day before Passover, before the NAACP, before the basketball championship tonight. But that doesn't begin until 9 o'clock. It will be over before then. What I want to do is begin by talking about how I got involved as an expert witness in the Abu Ghraib trial of one of the military policemen who was in charge of the torture center at Abu Ghraib. It was actually April 28th, 2004, when 60 Minutes revealed those horrible pictures that somehow had been sneaked to them, probably for a lot of money. And then Seymour Hersh did his expose in the New Yorker. So the world suddenly saw these pictures of American soldiers, men and women, not only abusing prisoners, but putting themselves in the pictures. And in a minute, I'm going to show you some of those pictures, some you haven't seen before, which are more horrific than what we have been seeing. The images were horrific. I was startled, but I was not surprised. The images and the abuse, and the big debate whether it's abuse or torture, is inexcusable, but from a psychological point of view, it's not inexplicable. And my goal is, how do we explain, how do we understand those things? It was not surprising because there were direct parallels, visual parallels, with what I had seen 35 years earlier in the Stanford Prison Experiment, a study I will describe in some detail. You've heard some things about it, in a study in which I spend a chapter a day in the book, going into great detail about it. What happened immediately is what happens every time there is a scandal in the police department of any major city. The people who run the shop say it's a few bad apples. And immediately, the same day, the head of Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Myers, came on and said, few rogue soldiers, a few bad apples. It's not systemic. The whole rest of the military, except for these 7 men and women, are good American soldiers. The president said, we're going to get to the bottom of this, which, of course, paren means what? They're never going to get to the top of it. As a social psychologist, what I have learned is something called attributional charity. Namely, when we're trying to understand any complex behavior, you don't want to rush to blame people. That's called the dispositional analysis, and it's what we all do. It's, you see some evil behavior, some bad behavior, some crazy behavior, and you want to say, who did it? Let's find them, let's punish them, and so forth. What social psychologists like myself try to do is to say, it could be bad people, but before we blame anybody, why don't we try to figure out what was the situation like that they were in that could have had a causal impact on them? So the attributional charity is, be charitable before you blame anybody, call anybody a bad apple or bad seed or any of those things. And after we've done the situational analysis, if it turns out that that's wrong, there's nothing in the situation that provoked this particular behavior, then we say, yeah, I guess they're bad apples. So I went on, did a lot of interviews saying they could be bad apples. I want to begin by saying it was probably the barrel that was bad. Well, but how could I say that? I mean, you know, so it was a good soundbite because it got picked up by lots of media. But how could I say that without knowing anything about any of the soldiers or the situation they were in? Fortunately for me, the legal counsel for one of these soldiers contacted me, having heard me on the radio, and said, we'd like you to join the defense team for Staff Sergeant Chip Frederick. He was the highest non-commissioned officer in charge of the night shift, and all the abuses took place on the night shift. We'll see why that's really important. And I didn't have time to do it, and I said, sure, how could I not? Because now I could find out what really happened there. Because as an expert witness, I had access not only to all of the images, and there are more than 1,000 of them, I also had access to all of the investigative reports that the Army subsequently did. And by now, there are a dozen of them. And they're called independent investigations. The independent, it's not clear why that word is used other than, you know, make it sound good. 11 of the 12 are by generals. One is by the former Department of Defense Secretary James Schlesinger, ordered by Rumsfeld. As an aside, the amazing thing is not one of these is by the Senate Armed Service Committee. I mean, that would be independent, but somehow all of these are by generals. And even, I'm going to tell at the end, even though they were by generals, they were ordered to get to the bottom of this, they could not resist blaming the system. So I became an investigative reporter. I gave up my social psychology mantle, and I said, suppose I was an investigative reporter trying to find out everything there is to know about this guy, everything there is to know of the place he was in, this prison, what is this exotic name, Abu Ghraib, and what was it like to be in that particular situation? We call it the behavioral context. And then I asked the question, which I had never asked before, who created the situation? Social psychologists stop at the level of analysis focusing on the situation. We've never been interested in what is the system that maintains that situation. And you'll see later on in the talk that that turns out to be the most important question. So the Lucifer effect is not only the title of the book and it's the title of the talk, it's really an attempt to understand how good, ordinary people could turn evil. Now, evil is a big fancy term. The only reason I use it because I want to recapture it for psychology from theologians and historians and playwrights and poets. And I'm not focusing on evil people. I'm interested only in how good people do evil deeds. The question, what makes people go wrong, is a question that's been asked endlessly. You know, again, by theologians, by historians, by political scientists. Psychologists tend to avoid those big kinds of questions. We have really good techniques for answering very specific questions. And so in general, our analysis has been at a more molecular, micro level, or molar, but not this grand level. My background in psychology as an undergraduate was in sociology and anthropology, as well as psychology. Sociologists, anthropologists are interested in systems. They're interested in institutions, the family, church, and psychologists are focused on individuals. And nobody's really looked at the individual in an institution. What is the impact of institutions on people or people on institutions? And so that's where I come along. This is a wonderful illusion. Some of you know by the artist M.C. Escher. And it's an illusion of angels and devils. Look at it for a moment. And some of you are going to see a world full of angels, and some of you are going to see a world full of devils. If you look at the white as the figure, you see angels. Well, here's the wings, here's a face, here's a little tutu, here's another angel. It's a world full of goodness. Make the white now the background and black the figure. So we're going to focus here on, well, I'll make it easier for you. If we look at here, so here's the devil, here's horns and the wings, and now if the black is the figure, the white the background, it's a world full of evil. So what this tells me is the world is filled with good and evil, has been, will always be, because good and evil are aspects of human nature. The other thing it tells me is that, reminds me that Lucifer was God's favorite angel. Lucifer means the light. In fact, in the scriptures, he's called the morning star. Number one, the top angel of all. And apparently, according to various biblical analyses, he refused God's command that all angels should honor Adam. Adam was God's favorite creature. And Lucifer allegedly says, I was prior to him, I am an angel, he's mortal, I refuse to bow down and honor him. Well, that was the sin of pride and the sin of disobedience, and God was not into reconciliation or conflict reduction and sent Michael the archangel after him. There was a big battle. Lucifer and other angels who agreed with him were kicked out of heaven, and paradoxically, it was God who created hell. And at that moment, evil, that's the first time evil began to exist in the world. And as you know, then Lucifer got back in the form of Satan to show that he was right and God was wrong, that Adam wasn't worth honoring because he could be seduced in a minute. He could get him to disobey God, which he did when he ate the fruit of the tree of knowledge. So for me, the Lucifer effect is really about the transformation of human character. The thing that's most interesting in psychology, that students love, is clinical psychology. And the question is, how could ordinary people go crazy? And the other thing that students are interested in is developmental psychology. How do little infants become children, become adolescents? So it's really transformation that is really exciting about psychology. And for me, it's been the same kind of thing. How is it that smart people make dumb decisions? How is it that sane people do sometimes insane things? And now is how is it good people do evil? So I'm interested not in the transformation of angels to devils, but good people, like any of us, not to do devilish things, but to do a bad thing in a particular situation sometimes. And the key in the Lucifer effect is that these good people are transformed, they're corrupted by powerful situational forces. And that's the main part of the talk today. Well, what are those what is it about some situation that could make us do those things? And the foreshadowing is it's only by recognizing what are those powerful situational forces that we can avoid them, we can change them, we can reduce them, and that's the best way to deal with evil. It is not by identifying the evil witches, burning them in oil, or getting them to confess, or torturing people, because we've tried that, did that, and it doesn't work. One definition of evil, a simple one, is evil is knowing better and doing worse. For me, a psychological definition is evil is the exercise of power to intentionally harm, and this is psychologically, to demean, debase, degrade, dehumanize other people, to hurt physically, torture, abuse, or to destroy mortally, to kill people, or symbolically to kill ideas, to kill religions, concepts. Now, obviously, there's a lot of debate because evil is relative. You know, a suicide bomber who's a terrorist to us and does evil things is a freedom fighter to the other side. So again, evil it's relative to a time, to a place, to a nation. But the bottom line is, evil is it's this exercise of power, and it's really to put cruelty into the world and demean human dignity. The question is, why are we fascinated with evil? I think it's about the power. It's about the person who does evil is demonstrating to us that he or she, or the group, has power to control and dominate other people, animals, or the environment, nature, and especially when it's creative, unique, or absolute and raw, because especially when it's unimaginable, you can't imagine doing it. So the evil of 9/11 was you cannot imagine first somebody weaponizing a commercial airline, and then that airline going into 210-story towers and vaporizing them before your eyes. I mean, in a way, that's the most extreme evil we've ever seen. I don't think we're really interested in the consequence. I don't think we're interested in the fact that people die or suffer. It's really that first step. It's the process of the power. So I'm going to begin with a case study. If this was Mass General and you were clinical psychologists, we would begin by saying, here's a patient we want to understand. So we begin with a case study. And we bring what is all the evidence we have about this person, so we all agree, here's the content, here's the evidence we want to deal with, make sense of. So what I'm going to show you is what I call digitally documented depravity. These are the pictures that soldiers took. Because everybody has a cell phone camera or a small digital camera with no censorship, you don't have to send it to a lab, you do it yourself. You can take thousands of pictures, you can put them on a CD, you can circulate them as these were. Some of these are on screensavers. And you take pictures of everything. You take pictures of dead people. You take pictures, of people in mass. You take pictures beating up people. You put yourself in the pictures. You take pornographic pictures. This is now part of our society. I call these trophy photos, and in the book I have a number of different explanations of what trophy photos are. They're like the big game hunters we used to see. Fortunately, with the animal rights movement, you don't see that anymore. Famous people with big swordfish and marlin, or on top of a buffalo and so forth. But all of these are pictures that were taken from the cameras of the military policemen. And what's critical is these are Army reservists. Nobody's told you that. These are weekend soldiers. These are soldiers with zero mission-specific training. They had no training to do this job in that place, especially in a war zone and wartime. And they all were on Tier 1A, the night shift. Tier 1A is the Center for Interrogation, where military intelligence, the CIA, and interrogators, civilian interrogators, are getting paid $1,000 a day from Titan Corporation, were there to interrogate detainees. The detainees, they first wanted to know about Al-Qaeda, and they had no information. Then they wanted to know about the insurgency. They went around arresting whole families, a sweep through a village. And so when Ship Frederick began, there were 200 people in that prison, 200 detainees in September. In a few months, there were 1,000 detainees. And you know what that means? It means that you couldn't possibly interrogate them. Because in addition to the interrogators, you needed people who could speak Arabic. You needed translators, and they had very few of them. And so most of these prisoners, as in Guantanamo Bay, just languished there. The estimates are that at most, of all those people, maybe 2% had any relevant information. And once they're there, a week or two, whatever information they have is cold. They know about what Al-Qaeda or the insurgency was going to do 2 weeks ago. And the longer you keep them there, like in Guantanamo Bay, some people are there 4 or 5 years. Whatever information they have is not only cold, it's irrelevant. So I try to arrange these in a dramatic sequence with sound effects in order to emphasize the horror of the experience. So let's go down into that dungeon. Can we dim the lights? So pretty horrendous. And again, the focus is on how could this have happened? There's no question now that the 7 men and women who were Army reservists in that night shift perpetrated these horrible things, and they put themselves in the picture. They were all guilty. All of them got various prison sentences or were dishonorably discharged. This is Brigadier General Janice Karpinski, who was allegedly in charge of the prison, although she never visited Abu Ghraib because they told her it's military intelligence hole. She said, okay. You can't be a superintendent of a prison to have a place that's off, not under your control. She was also a military police, she was also Army Reserve Brigadier General, had never run a prison and was put in charge of all the prisons in Iraq. You can think of why they did that, put a woman in charge of all the prisons in Iraq who had never had any experience running a prison. And in fact, when this occurred, she's the only officer who got demoted and essentially was forced to retire. But it was partly her fault because she was never there. This is former Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld. We're going to find out most of the terrible things you saw, except for the sexual things, were ordered by him. In my book, I have the order that he issued for Guantanamo Bay, and then General Miller at Guantanamo Bay brought those to Abu Ghraib. But it was directly on orders from Rumsfeld to Miller to General Sanchez at Abu Ghraib. And so they want to know who is responsible for these abuses. I begin with a different question, because once you say who, there's only people. And this is a lovely cartoon of the tree calling the apple bad. Lindy Eglin is unfortunately, the notorious young woman who had her 21st birthday in that prison. She's the one with the dog having a Iraqi on a leash. I call it a little shop of horrors. And the question is, what is to blame? What could be people? But it's also, I'm obviously going to argue for the situation. When you say who is to blame, you bias the search for, the person, for the disposition. So how do psychologists begin a search for an explanation here? The way we begin is always focusing on people. Psychology is a scientific study of the behavior of individuals and their mental behavior and their mental processes. So it's our whole approach, especially in clinical psychology and psychiatry and assessment and motivation, is at the individual level. Cognitive psychologists want to understand what happens inside of people's heads. Social psychologists are one of the few who come across and say, but people are always behaving in a situation, so we really should understand something about the person and something about the situation. So the dispositional analysis would begin by saying, let's find out if these people had sadistic tendencies, what kinds of character defects they have. Let's explore the inner determinants that led these people to do that, no matter what situation they were in. Those are the bad apples. The situation approach is, let's begin by saying maybe these are good men and women who are corrupted by the behavioral context, by powerful situational forces, which I'll describe later, and let's call that the bad barrel. The next level up is the system, which says the system creates that bad barrel. And it's a bad barrel of prison put in a bad barrel of war. And when you talk about systems, this is the political influence, the historical, cultural, economic, and especially the legal, because that gives legal definition. That makes things legal and makes some things illegal to do, because it's a system that creates the barrel, that maintains the barrel, and ultimately mismanages it. So here I'm going to talk about the bad barrel makers. I'm sure many of you, when you were young, were fascinated by Robert Louis Stevenson's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde story. It's a story about this good Dr. Hyde playing in his lab, developed some chemical and took it and was transformed into the evil Mr. Hyde. And when the drug wore off, he had to do it again. So he's the subject in his own experiment. He did not have to go to human subjects research committees to get approval. And so whatever was in that chemical was enough to transform his character from good to evil. And so the question I always wondered as a kid is, is there some other way to do that without the chemicals? Obviously, we want a drug-free America, right? And maybe social psychology could do two things and also help us understand how those soldiers, assume they were once good, I'll try to present evidence for that, could have been so corrupted. So let's start really almost at the beginning, back in 1963, with a study that some of you know about. I'll describe very quickly. This is a study which really begins the question, would you electrocute a stranger if Hitler or one of his representatives told you to? The answer you say is no. That was Nazi Germany, 1939. This is America, 2007, et cetera, et cetera. And he says, maybe you're right, but being a good Jewish kid, he was concerned about the Holocaust. Could it ever happen again? Could it ever happen in New Haven, Connecticut? He was a young professor working at Yale, his first job. And he was also my high school classmate at James Monroe High School in the Bronx. And he put this ad in the newspaper. So you get up in the morning, you see this ad, and the ad says, we'll pay $4 an hour for a study of memory. What's important is he says, we don't want college students, we don't want high school students. We want ordinary people. What do you mean ordinary people? Factory workers, city employees, laborers, barbers, telephone operators, clerks, the run-of-the-mill of American, okay? Ages 20 to 50s. So he gets a wide range of people. They come to the lab at Yale, but these are not Yale students. Almost everybody who talks about Milgram's study, because it was done at Yale, says it's students. No students. Ordinary people. So he runs 500 of them in various experiments there. And then he says, well, maybe what's influencing the results is that if you're in New Haven, there's one thing. There's Yale. There's nothing else. So he moves the lab to Bridgeport, Connecticut, puts it in a storefront, no connection to Yale, and runs 500 more people in a bunch of other experiments. This is the most representative study in all of psychology. 1,000 ordinary people in two different cities in 16 different experiments, which I'll describe in a minute. So you come to the lab, and he says, psychologists want to help people improve their memory. He gives you a whole spiel about how important memory is. Then he says, we know that rewarding the correct answer improves memory, improves learning. That's what B.F. Skinner showed. But nobody studied the effects of judiciously applying punishment. You make an error, you get punished. Get it right, you get rewarded. Maybe that combination will help improve memory. And we want you to help us. So that's the ideology. The ideology is always the big lie, like national security. And so it's the thing which makes everything follow seems reasonable. And so he says, we want one of you to be a teacher and one of you to be the learner. So now these are good roles to play. And the teacher is going to teach the learner something. When the learner gets it right, you say, good. Learner gets it wrong, you deliver the shock. You deliver the punishment. You don't even say shock, punishment. And you draw straws, and you're the teacher and you're the learner. And we put the learner in a room. We hook him up to a shocking system. And the learner is always, at least when he's running men, he also ran a study with women, is this nice middle-aged guy, like a Dutch uncle. A guy you wouldn't want to hurt in any way. The teacher sits before a shock apparatus, and he says, when the guy makes it right, you say, good, over the intercom. The person you're going to shock is in the next room. But when he gets it wrong, you press a button to deliver the shock. It's a high-tech shock apparatus. You begin with small 15 volts. He can't feel it. And each successive increases by 30 volts, 15, 45, etc. And he's in there. You're doing this. He doesn't say anything. And he's getting things right. Now he begins to dumb down. And you're going across. Now he starts yelling because it hurts. And he says, it hurts. I don't want to go. It's really terrible. And now he starts screaming. You're a good person. You turn to the experiment and say, who will be responsible if something happens to him? He says, I'll be responsible. Continue. And it goes on and on. The guy's screaming more and more. And you say, I don't want to do this. You know, I quit the experiment. He said, I'm sorry, you have a verbal contract. You must go on. And all the ways you usually use to get out of unpleasant situations are now not working. So the experiment, who starts off as a just authority in the lab coat, he doesn't care what you say. He says, you must go on. You must. And you don't have the guts to say, get up and walk out. You're trying to be a nice person working within the system. And now it gets up for some people to 375 volts. The guy says, I have a heart condition. I want out. I don't want to go on. And you keep complaining, but nothing is working. It gets at 375 volts. The guy screams, thud, silence. And what do you say? Sir, there's something wrong. Somebody should go in and see him. He says, I'm sorry, don't you remember the rules? Failure to respond is an error of omission, which is the same as an error of commission. Continue to shock. Well, at that point, let's do a critical thinking exercise. You're there to help improve his memory. He's either unconscious or dead. Why would you think to go on? So at that point, everybody should quit. We'll see what happens in a minute. But the question is, who would go all the way? The extreme is 450 volts. When you started at 15, you never imagine you're going to get up there. And in fact, when you get to 375 volts, it says danger, severe shock. When you get up to 350, it says triple X, the pornography of power. Okay? You can't imagine you would ever do that. So the question is, this 375 is where the guy screams, there's silence. And if you go on, you shock it. You're giving him the word test. He's not responding. And you're going to continue to shock and shock and shock. Let's look at the data. Oh, before we look at the data, Milgram asked 40 psychiatrists, individually, living in New Haven, Connecticut, probably mostly at the medical school, what percent of all Americans would go all the way? Describing the study the way I did, perhaps without the drama, and they said only 1%. They said that's sadistic behavior, and only sadists would engage in sadistic behavior. So that's the base rate. Anything above that is significant. They could not be more wrong. Why were they wrong? Their whole training is training only in the dispositional analysis. For psychiatrists, everything is inside your head. Sadism, goodness, good and evil, everything, they don't deal with good and evil. Sanity and insanity are in your head. And that meant they ignored all of the situational variables, the lab coat, the roles you're playing, the diffusion of responsibility, I'll be responsible, the rules that are changing. And they ignored all of that to say only 1%. We call that the fundamental attribution error. We do it all the time. Every time when we're trying to understand something where we focus primarily on the person and we ignore the situation, that's called the fundamental attribution error. So here's the data. This is the number of subjects who drop out here. So this is nobody drops out up to 28. And this is the amount of shock. Nobody drops out to 285 volts. Not a single person quits. And now, okay, now what is it? 4 people drop out, 3. And now here's that magical 375. If you get that high, the guy's unconscious or dead, no one drops out. Everybody goes all the way. 2/3, 65% go all the way. Doesn't make sense. Except you've tried everything to get out, nothing is working. At this point you say, I shock 1, 2, 3, and I'm out. So giving him 3 more, he's already dead. He doesn't, what difference does it make? He's not going to feel it. But it's the way to exit. So it's not only a study in blind obedience to authority, which is described. It's a study in not understanding how to exit a horrible situation, where suddenly this just authority is now totally unjust. So the result is not 1%, 65%. Well, this is only one study of many that Milgram did, but people said, you know what? Maybe they really didn't believe he was being shocked. The guy's in the other room, he's yelling. In fact, he wasn't shocked. He was an actor. He was a Confederate. It was all tape recorded, all the screams and so forth. Well, so what Milgram did is to say, let's look at what happens let me put it differently. So two-thirds, this is 60%. In many studies, it's 2/3. But you could raise it to over 90%, or you could eliminate it. Study 16 is, if you first see somebody like you, a peer, administer the shock all the way, you do it. On the other hand, what happens if people rebel? Study 5, if you see 2 people like you while you're waiting, if they rebel, you rebel. And in these various other studies, it's if you have the guy not remote but closer to you, you don't do it. In fact, how do you eliminate it? Study 1, if the guy says, I want to be shocked, you don't do it. You say, that's sick. I'm not a sadist. I'm not going to deal with a masochist. You don't. But what this is, it really says what Milgram did is he's really quantifying evil. It's almost as if he's putting a human nature dial, and as you turn it, you can have blind obedience to authority go from 0 up to over 90%. The only good message here is that under the most extreme circumstances, there's still about 10% of people who resist. And that's what I'm going to get to at the end, the psychology of heroism. But when people say, if I was in a situation, I would do it, yeah, if you were the rare 10%, the exception to the rule, maybe. But we all can't be the exception to the rule. Okay? So that's what we have to focus on next. Now, a lot of people said, you got the results because nobody believed he was really being shocked, because he wasn't. So 2 psychologists did a terrible study, worse than the Milgram study, because this is the subject that's going to be shocked. You're going to have college students in a class in learning and conditioning, and their job is to condition this puppy. And the way you're going to condition him, you're going to shock him when he makes a mistake. And 20 kids are female and 20 kids are male, and they're going to sit before this puppy and try to condition him. So before I go on, can you imagine any situation that you could be in that you would shock that puppy over and over again? And in fact, you have a switch. Your box has 10 switches. You start with a little shock, and you go up 1 to 10. And in fact, when you press the button, you know what? The puppy is really getting shocked. It's actually a low-level shock, but puppy's pores are sensitive, and the puppy is jumping and squealing. And you can assume he's not a Confederate, he's not, he's not getting paid by the experiment. So you know, press a button is a direct link between your behavior and the consequence. So when you said, no way, I would never do this, I can't imagine. But, whoops, oh. I don't, let's go. So, you're supposed to turn off your cell phones. I never use my cell phone, but, okay. So now suppose the guy in the lab coat, the white lab coat, is not some random guy. In fact, in the Milgram study, he was a high school biology teacher. It wasn't Milgram. He never ran any sub. Here now, the guy is your psychology teacher, and your grade is going to depend on it. Maybe that changes the story. So the puppy is in what they call a shuttle box, and these are electrified grill, and when you press the button, electricity goes in the thing, and the puppy is jumping and squealing and turning. Your job supposedly is, when the light goes on, the puppy has to see it, turn around, and go to the safe area. If he doesn't do it, in a certain period of time, you shock him. And they're supposed to get the puppy to do it. Well, the puppy is not learning that, and you shock him again and again. And so the question is, who would go all the way to the maximum volts? For the men, it was 50%, right in front, looking at this puppy, pressing a button. Women, let's take a vote. Caring, kind, nurturing. They're in tears. I'm going to take the puppy home. I'm not that kind of person. No way. You know, I love that puppy. Puppy is the most wonderful thing in the world. 100%, everyone, 100%, 20 out of 20. Does that mean women are more evil than men? No. Grades are more important. This is now 1971. And in 1971, women were more likely to be obedient to male authority than they are now, fortunately. So it's not about evil. It's about how you seduce people to do something. They say, I would never do that. Now you're doing it. The important thing in this study is they never published a study because they presented it at the American Psychological Association, and the shit hit the fan. People are yelling at it. And so it is in the archives of psychology, but it's never been published. And fortunately so. But it's important because people, you know, at least somebody who's read my book said, oh, your book is not about human nature, it's about men nature. Only men do these evil things. Well, it turns out not to be true, and I'm going to show you another. So the Milgram studies, you put women in, they do just what men do. Here's a study with women. They do it more extreme than men. And I'll present a study in a minute to show that, that the situational power affects any of us. Men and women, old people, young people, educated people or not. You just have to use more skill. Okay? All research is artificial. You're never ever going to be in a situation with a shock box and stuff. So we always ask the question, what is the external validity? What in the real world does the fundamental concepts relate to? 912 American citizens committed suicide or were murdered by their family or friends in the jungle of Guyana because of their blind obedience to this man who was their priest, Reverend Jim Jones, pastor of People's Temple, Church of Christ Disciples. He gave the orders for them to commit suicide. But he didn't say, he said revolutionary suicide. In fact, he said, mothers, be kind to your children. Give them the medicine first. The medicine is cyanide, Kool-Aid, cyanide and Kool-Aid. He said it will not hurt. The kids are screaming their brains out because it produces convulsions. Then give it to your parents. Be kind to the elders. And so people are giving it to their parents. And then take the medicine yourself. We have the last hour tape in which he's telling, so we can analyze what he did. In 30 minutes, he got 921 American citizens to commit suicide in this way. And if they didn't commit suicide, then they were either injected with cyanide or shot. So this is the modern Lucifer effect. Here's a man of God who becomes the angel of death. So what I get from the Milgram study is not simply, oh, gee, how easy it is to seduce good people to do bad things. It's really a recipe, if you look at the details, for how cult leaders, for how con men, for how authorities can seduce any of us into doing evil deeds. You've got to start with ideology. All evil begins with a big lie. If you look at Hitler's Mein Kampf, he says, in dealing with the Jewish question, I'm doing the Lord's work. I studied torturers in Brazil who tortures death squad executioners. And there was national security is threatened by communists and socialists. And communists and socialists have to be interrogated, made to confess, and then killed. And these were by fascists that our government supported, fascists throughout Latin America, Central America, and Greece. And now it's turned around, so the enemy is not communist socialist, it's fundamentalist Muslim. You always begin with a small first step. Just sign here, just give 10 cents, just a drop of blood. You always begin with a step that it seems insignificant because you cannot imagine that that's the first step in the descent to hell. And then you want successively increasing small actions. You want to start with a just authority, and he's going to now change, but gradually over time. So we teach our children to respect authority, but we don't teach them to make that distinction between a teacher who starts off good and now is abusing. I used to love math until I had Mrs. Wasserman in the 6th grade when she was giving algebra proof. She said you had to sit on your hands so you wouldn't disturb her. And so after a while, and she went on and on, your hands got numb. And algebra now is associated in my mind with pain. And so this teacher for me is evil. She destroyed my love of math and certainly all the other kids in PS 25. And so here's a teacher who, you see, parents, she's rigorous and tough and so forth. She did an evil thing. You need rules. Rules are impersonal ways to control personal behavior. But when the rules are vague and changing, you always say, I told you the rule says. You say, I don't remember that thing about errors. Well, it's your fault not to remember. The rule says. Situation always relabels. This is out of Orwell. So you are now an aggressor harming somebody. But no, you're a teacher helping. So keep shocking. You're helping this person. You're a good father preparing your son for the hard knocks of the world. So keep knocking him around. You always want models of compliance. You always want to say, look, all your neighbors bought my journals, or here's all the people who are willing to do this. You want verbal dissent. You say, yeah, you're good. Say it again. You're not that kind of person. That really, the puppy doesn't care. Doesn't care if you're crying, doesn't care if you say, I'm not that kind of person. Just don't keep shocking the button. So what you want is verbal dissent, which is a feel-good thing, but you insist, if you're the evil authority, on behavioral compliance. Keep pressing the button. And last thing is, make exiting difficult. This is the key to date rape. Nobody dates a rapist. You date friends, a guy, a classmate, so forth. And now he's all over you, and you say, time out. No, I don't want to do this. And he's not listening. And as long as you maintain the usual traditional female, good woman orientation, he's going to be all over you. You don't know how to exit. You don't know how to do what you have to do. In this case, scream, call for the police, kick him in the groin, whatever you have to do. But unless you know how to exit a situation, you're going to be trapped, as in the Milgram study. While Milgram is doing that, I'm reading Goulding's Lord of the Flies. And Goulding's Lord of the Flies, if you remember, is about how one of the boys changes his appearance, paints himself, and now gets the other boys to do it. They can do something that they were unable to do before. It's about the power of anonymity, the loss of control that disinhibits sexual behavior and violent behavior. That was the theme of the story. Boys got hungry. The only food was pigs. They tried to kill the pigs. They couldn't do it. Killing was inhibited. These are Christian choir boys, according to Goulding. But now, simply changing your external appearance somehow disinhibited, liberated them from these constraints. And the question is that a novelist conceit, or is that psychologically valid? Essentially, in this situation, what he's talking about is, ordinarily, what controls our behavior is cognitive control. It's thinking about what would happen if I'm responsible, suppose I'm accountable if anybody found out. It's really self-constraint that keeps us from behaving immorally. And if you knock this out, and you now make the situation the controlling factor, meaning what is everybody else doing, and I'm going to do what everybody else does, then you set up for evil. So we did a study, all with women. Women students are now going to shock other women. And we give a big cover story. We tell them it's a study of how we want to see how women, how creative women can be under stress. Their job, be creative. Your job is to stress them. So again, it's reasonable, okay? Psychologists are interested in that relationship. But we don't want them to see your reaction. So we're going to put you in a big floppy lab coat and put a hood over you because we want to eliminate nonverbal behavior. And there's going to be 4 people in your group. We're going to take away your name, you're 1, you're 2, you're 3, you're 4. We put them in these little Ku Klux Klan outfits. And within the frame of the study, nobody's laughing. It seems reasonable because they bought, again, the big cover story. Social psychologists call it the cover story. It's, again, our big lie. And now we give them a sample of the shock. And again, whenever you hear about research, the second question, while you're listening, is what is the comparison group? What is the control group? These are women from the same population, NYU students in introductory psychology, randomly assigned, you flip a coin. They're in the condition where you're going to individuate them. You're going to emphasize the individuality. They have name tags, Cynthia Jackson, Marsha Johnson. In the other group, we de-individuate. We say you're 1, you're 2, you're 3. We cover your appearance. So it's really a study of individuation versus de-individuation. Now, there's nobody there like a Milgram. You must go on. I leave the room. I go inside. They're looking through a screen, and here's the first of the victims. I give her something. She has to give me a remote associate, creative thing. When an amber light goes on, your job, put your finger on the button. When a green light goes on, shock is in the system. You believe that because she starts screaming and twisting and turning. She's not being shocked, but there's a little light that she sees, and she's an actress. You have 20 trials that shock her. We drag her out and bring the second woman in. You have 20 trials again. So here's the data summarized. Now, it's how long you hold your finger down. So the dependent measure, the thing we're looking at is it's the shock duration. In the Milgram study, it was the intensity. This is how long you hold your finger down. The longer you hold your finger down, the more she's jumping and turning. This is the first 10 trials, and this is the second 10, averaged across the 2 different women. At the beginning, the women who are individuated start at a low level, and they stay there. What's critical is the women who we put in the Lord of the Flies phenomena. We take away their identity. We made them feel anonymous. They begin giving twice as much, and over time, more and more. This increase is a significant linear increase. That means as they do it, they do more and more and more. And we find this over and over again. I did this study with the Belgian military. Instead of hoods, we had masks. Instead of shock, we had people throwing styrofoam balls. No matter how you do it, if you make people anonymous and you put them in a situation where they have permission in that situation to be violent, they will be violent. So here's the anonymity of terror. We forget, America's first terrorists were Ku Klux Klan. They used anonymity as a way of promoting fear and terror, not only among blacks, but Catholics and people throughout the South. Now, an anthropologist read the article I wrote on this and said, you know what? If it's true what you say then, we can get out of that little basement lab at NYU, and we can go in the real world, because the question here is, does it make a difference if, before warriors go to war, they change their appearance or not? It makes a difference in terms of how they treat their victims. So he said, in some cultures, we know they go to war without changing their appearance. In other cultures, they do the Lord of the Flies thing. They paint themselves, they put on disguises, or they wear masks. And so he went to the human area files and found 23 societies, cultures, where there was 2 bits of evidence. Do the warriors change their appearance or not? And then the dependent measures, do they kill, torture, mutilate? Not pressing a button on a shock box, kill, torture, mutilate. And he found 15 cultures where warriors changed their appearance and 8 cultures where they did not. And he found 10 cultures where they didn't kill, torture, mutilate, and 13 where they did. What happens if they don't change their appearance? If they don't change their appearance, they don't do anything. Only 1 of 8 kill, torture, mutilate. But we don't care. We care about the red zone. If they change their appearance, what happens is 12 of 13 that kill, torture, mutilate first change their appearance. If they change their appearance, 12 of 15 kill, torture, mutilate. So what does that tell us? That tells us culture has wisdom. All wars are about young men sent to war to kill other young men by old men. That's what war is all about. The only difference is sometimes over property, sometimes over turf, sometimes over revenge. And so you put them in uniforms. That's what a military uniform is all about, is to take any of us in our street clothes, put us in a uniform so we behave in a uniform way. We go through training to make us kill on demand, on command. But when the war is over, what do? We say, you must turn in a uniform. It's against the law to wear your uniform once you are discharged. And so you have military uniforms. In some cultures you have masks. Some cultures you paint yourself. because we want killing to be situationally specific. Okay? Another way you can get good people to do bad things is you can dehumanize the victim. We don't have to change you, we just have to change your perception of the victim. We don't want you to think of them as kin or kind, similar to you. In the extreme, they're animals. So my colleague Al Bandura did a study I'll describe very quickly, a very important study that is hardly ever referenced. He gets students from one college, let's say Stanford, in groups of 3, and he said, students from another college are coming, and we want you to help improve their problem-solving ability in a group. You're going to give them problems, and if they get it right, you're going to reward them. If they get it wrong, you're going to give a shock which goes to all of them. Seems reasonable. Again, the cover story, we want to help. The assistant takes your name, and then he goes inside, and you hear over the intercom, he tells the experimenter, the students from the other school are here, they are ready. You don't know anything about them except the college students, so that's neutral. In another condition, he goes inside, and what you hear him say is the students from the other school are here, they seem to me like animals. We're going to call that dehumanize. In the third condition, he says, you hear him say they seem like nice guys. You don't know anything about them. You haven't met them except somebody you don't know. It's a research assistant. He's an undergraduate. It says they're animals or nice guys. Remember, you know they're college students. So what difference does it make? You have 10 trials to give them shock, and the shock goes from 1 to 8. You start at a low level. If you're neutral, you stay here. If you are in the dehumanized condition, you start at the same level. So if you only did 1 trial, you say it doesn't make a difference. But you get the same effect I just reported to you. You get a linear increase. They shock, and they shock significantly more over time. The good news is, if you humanize people, say they're nice guys, you get a suppression. It's better than knowing nothing. So this is a very powerful study that says, sticks and stones may break your bones, but names can kill you. Names can kill you. And that's what prejudice is about. That's what discrimination is about. That's what stereotypes are about. You give the name. So soldiers in Vietnam, we call them gooks. I don't know what, I don't remember the name of Arabs now, but it's equal. What? Haji, or towel heads, or something. But it's a way to say you're going to suspend your morality. In fact, Bandura calls it moral disengagement. Good people put their morality in neutral at some times, and then they coast. And when you coast, then it means you're going to be influenced by everybody else in that car. You're going to all the backseat drivers. And that leads us up to the Stanford Prison Study I'll go through very quickly, and then we'll go back to Abu Ghraib. Stanford Prison Study, done way back in 1971, combines de-individuation, anonymity of place, dehumanization, role-playing and social modeling, moral disengagement, group camaraderie. We underestimate what a big role that plays in evil. The evil of Enron, the evil of these corporations, I'm going to talk about administrative evil later, is always getting with the program. It's always being a team player. It's never, we'd like you to cheat, lie. It begins with the accountant who says, you know, it's Friday, the numbers are not adding up. You know, why don't you just use this figure? And once you do that, that's the first step. Then next week, it's why don't you change 2 figures? And next week, it's more and more. So the path to evil always is that, remember that first 15 volts. Prisons are about power. Power differentials. Guards have more power than prisoners, and over time, they have to demonstrate to the prisoners they have total power and the prisoners have none. The other thing that I come out of both the Stanford Prison Study and Abu Ghraib is the evil of inaction. It's the good guards never once stopping the bad guards on the same shift when the bad guards are doing these terrible things. And unlike the Milgram study, where it's about an individual authority putting pressure on another individual, this is a study about institutions. This thing I talked. Most of us live our life in institutions, in families, in schools, in religious institutions, in hospitals, in old age homes at the end. And so it's a question of institutional power to push you in a certain way against the will to resist. And we want to believe individuals have the will to resist. Individuals are rational. Individuals who operate from free will. We believe in the dignity of the individual. And so no matter what the situation is, we can resist. And that's what the study is. We put an ad in the paper. We didn't have Milgram's money. We put this little ad in. We wanted people for 1 to 2 weeks study on prison life, but we wanted only college students. The students came from all over the United States because they were in summer school at Stanford and at Berkeley. Only 2 of them were Stanford students. It's called the Stanford Prison Experiment. simply because it was done in the basement of the Stanford Psychology Department. We had 75 volunteers take a battery of personality tests. We did interviews, background checks. We picked 24. Each one was normal, healthy on all dimensions, no history of crime, no physical pathology. And then we flipped the coin. You be a guard, you be a prisoner, you be a guard, you be a prisoner. They were all men. And then we began the studies. That means on day one, we had only good apples. We're going to put them in a bad barrel to see, can they resist, or does the bad barrel overcome the good guys? The only thing we did, so with the guards, we said, come down on Saturday. We put them in military uniforms. We gave them symbols of power. The prisoners said, wait in the home or wait in the dormitory. On Sunday, the experiment will begin.
Prisoner 819 did a bad thing. Prisoner 819 did a bad thing. Prisoner 819 did a bad thing.
That's Stanford Paradise, which I'm going to turn into hell in a minute. We didn't tell them that the city police were going to come around and do realistic arrests.
Police car pulls up in front, and a cop comes to the front door and knocks and says he's looking for me. So they, right there, they took me out the door, they put my hands against the car. It was a real cop car, it was a real policeman, and there were real neighbors in the street who didn't know that this was and there was cameras all around, neighbors all around it. They put me in the car, then they drove me around Palo Alto. They took me to the police station, the basement of the police station. Then they put me in a cell. I was the first one to be picked up, so they put me in a cell, which is just like a room with a door with bars on it. You could tell it wasn't real jail. They locked me in there in this degrading little outfit. They were taking this experiment too seriously.
Indeed we were. This is what one of our guards looked like. Military uniform, billy club, whistle, handcuffs. And then the idea I got from the movie Cool Hand Luke. Silver reflecting sunglasses, which conceals your eyes, which are critical in de-individuation. We created an anonymous prison yard in the basement of the psychology department. Prisoners first went through something called a degradation ritual, which happens in most military outfits and certainly in prisons, stripping them naked, putting a bag over their head, delousing them, assuming they're bringing germs in, and then putting them in a uniform, which was just a smock with a number on it. Instead of shaving their hair, we had them wear women's nylon stocking caps to remove individuality. This is 1971. Hair was really important to people then. As you'll see, everybody had hair and more hair. And this is the art in action. There was solitary confinement. And it began, so we videotaped with a hidden camera, and we observed it with a hidden camera. But most of the time, it was just guards and prisoners. The whole days, it was just prisoners interacting with guards. I was the superintendent. Craig Haney and Kurt Banks were my graduate students. They acted as lieutenants. We had an undergraduate play the role of warden. And we tried to make it as realistic as possible. We had a prison chaplain come down. We had Parents' Day, parents' nights with parents and boyfriend, girlfriends. We had a public defender come. We had parole board hearings run by a former ex-convict who had his parole revoked, not revoked, denied 17 times. So we did all the things to make it a realistic environment. And I told the guards, no physical force. Touching them with your billy club is symbolic of actually hitting them. I did not limit psychological abuse. And once the guards learned that, the initial push-ups, as you saw in the picture of Abu Ghraib, they started with push-ups and stuff, and that becomes boring. And over time, it got more humiliating, more degrading. cleaning toilet bowls out with their bare hands. You humiliate men. First, you strip them naked and you make fun of their small genitals, and then they begin to play sexually degrading games. Here are the hooded prisoners with legs chained, awaiting the parole board hearing. The kid you saw, he was the first prisoner to be arrested. He was the ringleader of a rebellion on the second day, but the guards crushed the rebellion physically, with physical force. And he was the first one to break down in 36 hours. And he had been a student activist at Berkeley, an undergraduate. It changed his whole life, so much so that he got a PhD at Berkeley in clinical psychology, did a dissertation on the shame of prisoners and the guilt of guards, and for the past 25 years has been working in the San Francisco County Jail. In the movie we made, A Quiet Rage, he talks about his whole job is raising the dignity of prisoners and trying to minimize the sadism of guards. His breakdown was followed every day after that by another prisoner showing the same kind of extreme emotional distress or breaking out in psychosomatic rash. The study, which was projected to go for 2 weeks, I had to end after 6 days. It was totally out of control. I felt I could not go to sleep knowing what the guards might do, and they did some horrendous things. We have a wonderful website, prisonexp.org, and an even more impressive website we just put up, lucifereffect.com. It has everything about the book, about the movie, Hollywood movie is going to be made, about the prison study, about me, and much more. Here it is. So it's lucifereffect.com. I hope you'll go there. Certainly have we have all kinds of special stuff that's downloadable for students. What are the real world parallels? Again, we got to ask that question. Well, the day after the study ended, George Jackson, other prisoners at San Quentin, there was a big escape, they were killed. 3 weeks later, it was Attica. So this little study that would never have been more than an article in a journal suddenly had national visibility, attention. I was invited to address 2 Senate subcommittees on prisons, and the little Stanford prison study started to have legs, and the legs keep growing. But compare this with this. They ran out of paper bags in Iraq, and so now they use black sandbag covers. This is in Guantanamo Bay. This is, again, in Guantanamo Bay. The reason they're wearing earphones is that they blast loud noise, and then if the prisoner talks, they give him earphones. That is, they're blasting loud noise into his ear. And this is a cartoon about making fun of why torture works as long as you keep it soft. Aside from my parallels, I mentioned James Schlesinger headed the only commission focused on the abuse of Abu Ghraib, but he was a former Secretary of Defense, and on his commission he had former generals. He says, psychologists have attempted to understand how and why individuals and groups who usually act humanely can sometimes act otherwise in certain circumstances. That's the Lucifer effect. He says the landmark Stanford study provides a cautionary tale for all military detention operations. And his commission compares, he said, but the Stanford system was benign. In military detention operations, soldiers work under stressful combat conditions that are far from benign. And then he goes on to say, here are all the conditions operating. It's that list. They talk about de-individuation, dehumanization, moral disengagement, and more. The most interesting thing for social psychologists is the following statement. The potential for abusive treatment of detainees during the global war on terrorism was entirely predictable based on a fundamental understanding of the principles of social psychology, coupled with an awareness of numerous known environmental risk factors. Findings from the field of social psychology suggest that the conditions of war, the dynamics of detainee operations carry inherent risk for human mistreatment, and therefore what? Therefore, they must be approached with great caution, careful planning, and training. What I'm going to tell you is there was no training, there was no careful planning, and there was no caution, because in our rush to war in Iraq, none of this was thought about. So there's actually a fuller body of social psychological research, and in my book I have 2 whole chapters on all of the social psychological research that supports the conclusion that situations can have unexpectedly powerful influence on us. But essentially, we have substituted social psychology for those chemicals and had the same effect of transforming good people into perpetrators of evil. At a given time, in a given situation, not always. So we take the chemical out of his hand, and we can still make good people into monsters. And essentially, it's, you know, the question I always get is, well, aren't some people born good and some people born evil? We really want to have a notion of evil is really, and goodness are in people. And my answer is no. My work, and especially the Lucifer effect, is really a celebration of the human mind, of its infinite capacity to be selfish or caring, to be heroic or villainous, to be creative or destructive. The human mind can do anything. We can be Mother Teresa, or we can be Saddam Hussein, because anything any human being has done, we have the capability of doing it in that situation, in that setting. So now let's go back in the last, in our last 15 minutes, let's go back to the dungeon in a real prison in Abu Ghraib. And what we need, now we know, the analytical tools that we need, and in the book I do this in much more depth, we need to understand the person. We need to understand the physical place. What kind of place was that thing called Abu Ghraib? We need to understand the psychological situation, the behavioral context that this guy was in and those other soldiers were in. And then we have to ask, what was the situation that created what was the system that created that situation? So who's this guy, Chip Frederick? He's Army Reserve MP in charge of Tier 1A night shift. He's the bad apple. So we're going to say, what was he like before he went down? What was he like when he was there? What was he like afterwards? What were the influences on him while he was on duty there? And so, as I said, I take on the role of investigative report. I'm going to find out everything there is to know about this guy, everything about that place. I'm not going to spend a day interviewing him, going through his psychological records. I check he was a prison guard in a small prison. I checked that. He had 9 medals. I found out what those medals were for. I'm talking to his wife, his sister. I'm talking to people who knew him. And then I'm talking to military people who were there at the time, independent of him and independent of the 7 men and women who did this thing. So I'm going to give the situational perspective to counter the bad apple dispositional view. So here he is. Here's a prisoner covered with shit, his own shit. He's called Shit Man. Mentally deranged prisoner who, what he would do is cover himself with shit. And Frederick would roll him in dirt so it wouldn't stink up the place, or put him in a gurney and tie him up. He didn't usually do this, but when he was doing it, somebody said, hey, sit down, we'll take a picture. And he was he and one of the women thought of the idea of putting electrodes on this guy's hand and telling him if he fell off the box, he would get electrocuted. They didn't think anything was wrong because it wasn't attached to anything, just hanging in there. Putting prisoners on boxes and hoods was one of the stress positions that Donald Rumsfeld advocated to help loosen up prisoners for interrogation. What was he like before going down into that dungeon? He is the most all-American, patriotic person I have ever met in my life. I mean, it's almost comical. His father's a West Virginia coal mine. He's a Baptist. He goes to church on Sunday. He plays softball. He hunts. He fishes. He has lots of friends. He goes bowling. You name it. He married. The only thing that's exceptional, he's married to an African-American woman. He's a great stepfather to her children. He loves the American flag. He gives it as a present. He puts it out in the morning, takes it in at night. Here he is in Kuwait just before he went down there. He loves the American. He tears up when they play the Star Spangled Banner. He should have been the poster boy for the military, not Pat Tillman, who turns out not to be killed by friendly fire. He might have even been murdered by people in his unit, but we know he was not a hero. And you remember Jessica Lynch. Everything about Jessica Lynch was fabricated. None of the things we knew that she was a hero. It was all a lie, every single bit of it. But we needed heroes, and we created these 2 false heroes when this guy would have been a real hero had he not gone down to that dungeon. So clinical assessment done by Army captain, a psychologist, and assessed in my house. Normal on every dimension. Not a single evidence of sadistic tendencies in any way. All-American young man, as I said, everything in his past says he is, you know, the salt of the earth. Model Army Reservist, he won 9 military awards and medals, proud to serve. Good guard, I checked his record, good guard in the prison, super patriot. And what about the situation? Everything in the Stanford Prison Study was in operation there. I mean, in my analysis, reading all the reports, same thing that Schlesinger's committee found. I won't go through all. Both of them, the worst things were on the night shift. Why? Because there was never a senior officer in 3 months ever went down to that dungeon at the night shift. It was filthy. It was horrible. It was chaotic. And some of the times at the night shift at Stanford Prison, I had to go to sleep. It was only me and 2 graduate students, and one of the graduate students halfway through the study had to go home. There was an emergency. So it was just me and an undergraduate and graduate student. We're working 24 hours a day. And the guards assumed when it got to the middle of the night, nobody was watching. Sometimes they were right, sometimes they were wrong. And so the worst abuses occur when the cat's away. He worked a 12-hour shift, 4 p.m. to 4 a.m. How many days a week? 7. How many days without a break? 40 consecutive days. And then he got 1 day off in 2 more weeks. What happened when he was off duty? When he was off duty, he went to sleep in a different part of the prison. And so he never left. The stress level, it was chaotic. It was filthy. The toilets were there wasn't toilets, the porta potties overflowing. There were rats running around. It's unsanitary. There were blackouts. And prisoners escaping. So suddenly everything is black. And there were 1,000 prisoners who were naked or had jumpsuits or speaking a strange language. And he was in charge of 1,000 prisoners, 12 Army Reserve Guards, 60 Iraqi police were smuggling weapons in all the time. And prisoners, in fact, are escaping. No training for this job and no supervision ever. I said he almost never left the prison. He slept in the prison. And so we call that a total situation. His whole life was organized around that setting. Extreme fear. This prison is under bombardment all the time. Across the street from the prison is a housing project. And they're shooting grenades and mortars. The British told us, don't use Abu Ghraib. It's too dangerous. In this setting, at least 5 soldiers and 20 prisoners were killed. So now there's this tremendous fear, every day of each job. And so really, he's exactly like one of my good guards. Before he went down to the prison, everything about him is like one of the Stanford Prison Experiment guards. Good in every way, probably not the same level of intelligence, and he didn't have the same kind of creative evil as they did. And then they put him in a situation like the Stanford Prison that corrupted him. What was he like afterwards, before his trial? So after this, he was accused. He came to California. I spent a day with him, getting to know him. So here's this monster. Here he is with Martha, his wife. Here he is with the San Francisco Giant cap. Here he is with me. And ordinary guy. And he says, I'm willing to die for my country. Well, what was the impact of my wonderful situational defense? Nothing. 8 years in prison, dishonorable discharge. He's now a prisoner. He was stripped of his 9 medals publicly. They took away 22 years of retirement pay. His marriage is destroyed. His life is wrecked. And in the trial, what the prosecutor said is essentially, those actions humiliated the military. Those actions humiliated the Bush administration. And it was not really what they did. It was about the pictures. Because the pictures went around the world. And they put him in solitary confinement in Kuwait. He did those things. The only other charge, he hit one prison in the chest once. That's the most violent thing that he did. For 8 years in prison, 22 years back pay, and put in solitary confinement. So the question is, who is responsible for using dogs to induce fear? It's called Fear Up. For nakedness of prisoners, for extreme stress and fear imposed, sleep, food, and sensory deprivation. It was both sensory deprivation and sensory overload, blasting loud noise that lights in their eyes, of concealing illegal practice from Red Cross observers, of abuses, suicide. There have been 21 murders in all of the American prisons in Cuba, Afghanistan, and Iraq. It was not Chip Frederick or any of the soldiers there. All of these came from Donald Rumsfeld, from General Miller at Guantanamo, and General Sanchez. In my book, I give all the specific detailed evidence of this allegation. So let's look at the system. One of the reports is by General Fay, which says, for a period of 7 months, military intelligence, they were in charge of Tier 1A, and the military police, usually their job is to maintain the security of the prison. And so for the first time in military history, the military intelligence were seducing military policemen to do part of their job, breaking the prisons, preparing them for interrogation. It's not me. General Fay says military intelligence allegedly requested, encouraged, condoned, or solicited military police reserve to abuse detainees, and/or they participate in detainee abuse themselves, and/or violate established interrogation procedures. The abuses would not have occurred had military doctrine been followed and mission training conducted. It means training of these Army reservists for the mission they were in. The environment created at Abu Ghraib contributed to the occurrence of such abuse, and the fact that it remained undiscovered by higher authorities for a long period of time. This went on for 3 months. Who's watching the store? How could those things happen? It's not one time. This is week after week over 3 months. A lot of the soldiers had those pictures on their screensavers on the computers. It was not undercover. General Fay and General Jones get together and they say there are 7 factors causing abuse. Of those, only 1 is dispositional. That is, the personal failures of these 7 soldiers. The other 6 are either situational or systemic. They say, looking beyond personal responsibility of the soldiers, there is leader responsibility and command responsibility. They say systemic problems and issues also contribute to the volatile environment in which abuse occurred. Again, the head of Joint Chiefs of Staff said, it's not systemic, it's only in this basement, it's only these guys. There have been 600 accusations of detainee abuse, 190 that never investigated. Of the 410 that were investigated, they cleared with no action, 260. To get down here, only 10 soldiers served a year, 30 served less than 1 year. All the officers get administrative discipline. That means it's a letter saying you shouldn't do this again. Okay? So no officer has been sanctioned other than Brigadier General Karpinski. Systemic means if you have a bad barrel of prison, a bad barrel of war, it's going to affect anybody. This is British soldiers in Basra. They're supposed to be, the salt of the earth. These were soldiers, not Army reservists. These were elite soldiers who were forcing prisoners to simulate sodomy and then took pictures of them. The only thing, they didn't put themselves in the pictures. In Guantanamo, there's a book by Eric Saar, S-A-A-R, called Inside the Wire. And what he shows is that we had women interrogators, I guess a Marine dad calls them torture chicks, who would sexually taunt prisoners, take off their blouse, sit on their lap, do lap dancing, pretend to smear menstrual blood on their face, and say, unless you confess, I'm going to leave it on, and I'm going to prevent you from washing it, and you're going to go back, and this is a horror for a Muslim man. And he details the specific things they did. Not by themselves. They didn't go down to Guantanamo Bay and say, oh, I'm going to do... This was a plan as part of a system plan to break the prisoners, to get them to confess. Administrative evil is a new kind of evil. And I put this in for Jared and for those of you in business school. It's a book by Adams and Balfour that says, most evil is not done by people. Most evil is done by corporations, by systems, because they can affect many, many people. Public and private organizations operate in legal frameworks, not ethical frameworks. And because of that, they can inflict suffering, various personal losses, even death to people by following cold rationality for achieving the goals of their ideology, their market plan, cost-benefit, bottom line. Bottom line is always efficiency and profit. As long as they're not explicitly prohibited by law, as long as the ends justify all means necessary to reach those goals. And of course, you always do it in disguised fashion. What you always have on your side is you have the media, if you have the law on your side in a small town or even sometimes the Supreme Court, you can get away with murder. General Counsel Alberto Mora, when he discovered that the CIA, in interrogating a high-value detainee, spent a month crushing this guy. Again, this interrogation log, everything is written down very efficiently, like the Nazis, was leaked to Time magazine and came out, I guess, a couple of months ago. And he says, after reading this, and this is a really powerful statement, if cruelty is no longer declared unlawful, but instead is applied as a matter of policy, it alters the fundamental relationship of man, it should be, and woman to government. The Constitution recognizes that man has an inherent right not bestowed by the state of laws to personal dignity, including the right to be free of cruelty. This applies to everyone. It applies to all human beings, not just in America, even those designated as, quote, unlawful enemy combatants. This, you remember, is how we got around the Geneva Convention. Say, these people we do not have to treat with dignity. These are not soldiers. These are unlawful enemy combatants. And he says, if you make this exception, the whole Constitution crumbles. It's a transformative issue. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who was a poet and was a prisoner in Gulag, Stalin's horror camps, Gulag Archipelago, says, the line between good and evil is not out there, it's not abstract, it lies in the center of every human heart. This is decisions that you have to make over and over again in your life. I want to end on a positive note after the horrible thing, as I do in the book. The last chapter in the book is Let's Sunshine In. This is Joe Darby. He's the guy who exposed the abuse at Abu Ghraib. One of the guys, Charles Grainer, gave him the CD and said, hey, look at this. And he said he looked at it, he thought it was funny when he first saw the guys in a pyramid. He said, I never thought of that. And then he saw increasingly horrible pictures, and he said, we're supposed to be bringing democracy to these people. This is horrible. And he took the CD and he gave it to an investigating reporter. And that took guts. He's, again, a private military policeman, the lowest form of animal life in the military. He's bringing this knowing what? Knowing these guys are going to get in trouble, knowing they're going to get back at him. But he did it anyway. He was put in protective custody for 3 years because everybody wanted to kill him, not only the other soldiers, but people in his hometown, because he then became the messenger that America was doing these bad things. And they had to put his wife and mother in protective custody for 3 years. He was just released. So I became interested in heroism. This is the famous tank man and the student in Tiananmen Square, and that he was this row of tanks about to crush the student rebellion. And he just went and stood in front, and he refused to move. And then one of the tank guy came up, and he started talking to him and said, what are you doing? We're Chinese. And he just talked him out of it. And the tanks actually turned and went away. He disappeared. He's anonymous. We don't know what happened to him. But my new research is going to focus, I've been embedded in evil since I was a little kid growing up in the ghetto in the South Bronx. I'm switching now to focus on heroism, because Hannah Arendt's famous theme of the banality of evil, she's trying to understand Eichmann, the butcher of Auschwitz, who orchestrated the deaths of 2 million Jews. And again, it's important on Passover to remember that. What she said is, before he went to Auschwitz, he was normal. The guy we see on the witness stand, normal. Psychiatrists interviewed him, they say, he's more normal than me. He's a good father, good husband, and so forth. It's when he went in that situation, where his job was to efficiently execute 2 million Jews in a very short time. So he had to orchestrate train conductors, engineers, biochemists, nurses, doctors, etc. And he did it very efficiently. She didn't have the concept, but it was situationally specific evil. And she called it the banality of evil because Eichmann looked just like ordinary people. I turn that around and say, you know what? The same thing is true of heroes. That is, there are heroes who are lifelong heroes. Gandhi, Mother Teresa, Nelson Mandela. Most heroes are heroes of the moment. They have never done anything heroic before. Most of them will never do a second thing, like Joe Darby. And something in a situation fuels what I call the heroic imagination. While other people, something in the situation is triggering a kind of hostile imagination. And so heroes are ordinary people. Heroic deeds are extraordinary. So we want to understand, how can situations have this opposite effect? And so I'm beginning to study the psychology of heroism and say, how do we encourage children to think about themselves as heroes in waiting? Everything we know from psychology is, if you label yourself as a hero, you're more likely to become a hero. If you label yourself as somebody who does not litter, you're less likely to litter. If you label yourself as somebody who helps other people, you're more likely to help in conditions of stress. So I'm saying, so the question is, what it means to be a hero, turns out, is only two things. The first thing is to move from passivity. Passivity is evolutionarily valuable. If you don't do anything, you're going to live. You're going to pass on your genes. You're going to pass on the sperm and eggs. So doing nothing is the basic thing. That's what every mother says. Don't do anything. Don't get in trouble. Mind your own business. As long as you do nothing, you're a passive bystander. You're only guilty of the evil of inaction. But in that situation, some people take action and become perpetrators. To be a hero means you have to get off the spot of being passive to take action. You can't be a hero without an action. But the second thing is, you have to stop being egocentric. You say, I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to take responsibility, and become sociocentric. That is, to think that somebody else's life is valuable. Not more than yours, but valuable. Or there's some principle that you have to uphold. And so let's look at a hero in action, and then we'll end with this.
On the New York City subway, it's hard enough finding someone who will give up his seat to a stranger, let alone be willing to give up his life for one.
train was coming in like that.
It happened just 50-year-old Wesley Autry, a construction worker and Navy veteran, was standing on a subway platform with his two little girls when right in front of them, a man started having a seizure.
He kind of stumbled and over his own feet and fall backwards. I see a train coming, but the train is so close, I'm like, what do I do?
Wesley jumped onto the tracks and thought if he could just lie on top of the man, keep him from flailing, maybe the train would roll right over both of them. The clearance was exactly 21 inches. Wesley and the man, 20 and a half.
No way the train can stop before this gentleman could get him up off the tracks. So he covered him with his body and pushed him down to a point where the train wouldn't hit his head and held him down under the tracks while the train came and rolled right over the top.
It gave Wesley's children the scare of their young lives.
I thought he was going to get killed.
And Wesley, the scare of his, too.
I'm like talking to him, sir, you can't move. I got two kids up here living for the father to come back. I don't know you, you don't know me. Listen, don't panic. You know, I'm here to save you.
As for the guy Wesley saved, he's 20-year-old Cameron Hollipter. And other than a few scrapes and bruises, his father says he's doing fine.
Mr. Autry's instinctive and unselfish acts save persons.
You know, the word hero gets thrown around a lot nowadays.
What a better way to say to start off the new year than to save a life.
Nice to be reminded of what one really looks like.
So if you would like some more about, I have a whole chapter on the new psychology of heroism, but also Dr. Z's 10 steps for resisting unwanted influence. And so thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I'll be happy to sign books.
Stick around.
We have questions. Well, we have a little time for questions.
Yeah, Dr. ZIMBARDO.
Yeah, people have to leave. Please, but people want to stay. We certainly have 20 minutes for questions.
There's a microphone over here and one over here. And
if you can go to the microphone, or I know you can't
recording.
pass them easily.
Some people may have thought this ends at
No, so I said no. No, people have to leave. Fine. We can save 15 minutes for questions, and then anybody wants to. Some of you bought books. I signed them, but I'd like to assign them personally to you. Then please come up. So let's have questions. Yes.
Thank you for your presentation. Very interesting, and I've known of your work for a long time. My question is what your thoughts are about the American Psychological Association's position about psychologists participating in military interrogations and their failure to kind of condemn some of the things that the American Psychiatric Association and other professional organizations have come out against. So,
yeah, it's a big problem. The American Psychological Association had issued a report called PEN, Psychologists Engaged in National Security. And the report essentially ended up saying that they do not endorse the international standard of preventing cruelty, and they endorse a more narrow Bush standard, essentially the unlawful enemy combatants. I'm on record against it, in part because the 10-person commission had 6 people from the military Department of Defense. Okay? So it's immediately biased. That is, they had to come up with that conclusion. Also, the person running the meeting, the former president of the American Psychological Association, said there would be no dissenting opinion. Everybody had to agree, and you know what the outcome is. Nobody could take notes except the head of the ethics committee. And it was biased. It was a terrible meeting which had to come out with that conclusion. Now, the problem is psychologists, you know, there are a whole division, military psychologists. Psychologists get funded by Department of Defense. Psychologists want to show that what we do has relevance. You want to help the government. You want to help society. You want to help industry. And there's a sense in which they were bought. They were bought out. And some of it is going to be exposed in the next couple of months, looking at the connections to government funding, to other kinds of things. So if you go to lucifereffect.com, and then from there go to click on the prison study, the article I wrote, it's called A Critique of Pens, is there, along with a lot of other stuff. Yes?
So in one of your slides you mentioned, well, these people weren't trained well enough and maybe we could reduce this if people knew more about these situational factors. But the other explanation is that people actually do know about these situational factors and they use it. The barrel makers use it to create these barrels.
Correct.
Could you say something about that?
No, see, I'm saying what can you do to prevent the soldiers from doing those bad things? And that's the equivalent of an inoculation. It's like a situational inoculation. That is, what we have to believe as academics is that knowledge changes behavior. That is, you know, the more educated you are, the less likely you are to be prejudiced. And partly because it's not that we make you liberal, we get you to think differently about yourself relating to other people. It turns out that there's probably evidence that okay, let me back up. There's a program called SEER, Search, Survival, Evasion, Resisting, Escape, that after the Korean War, when American soldiers gave confessions within 48 hours of being captured, we thought, well, this is communist mind control, that every military unit, Army, Navy, started a program to train soldiers to resist giving information when captured. And this has been going on for 30 years. Most of it is being done now at Fort Bragg for the Army. And essentially it's, what kind of things do you do to train you not to give information no matter what we do to you? Well, sometimes the things we do to you get you to give information. What that means is we now know a technique to get people to give information. So there is some evidence that the military, in fact, has turned it around and is using the knowledge they got from getting people to resist to getting people to yield. And in fact, there's some evidence that they, in fact, are using ideas from the Stanford Prison Study and from other psychological research to help in the devious deeds of breaking people's resistance. So yeah, and there's an article by, again, I have it. I think what you'll love about the Lucifer effect is that there's a huge amount of information. There's 50 pages of notes. Everything I say, I have either the URL, you get the whole report, or the article about it. And so there's an article by Jane Mayer in the New Yorker about this called The Experiment. And I have the reference to it, the URL. Great, thank you. Other question? Yes.
Have you ever found any personality variables that make someone perhaps more vulnerable to the power of the situation or makes them have a greater propensity to be an everyday hero?
No, I mean, that's the obvious thing. I mean, it's really difficult because some of my best friends are personality psychologists. And see, here's the problem. What personality psychology is all about is predicting your behavior in situations that you are familiar with. It's really, you know, it's not, you know, from everything we know, how would you be if you were a guard at San Quentin? How would you be at Katrina in a disaster? You know, these are unusual circumstances where very little about who you are and what you are carry over. So personality theory is really about how normal people behave in ordinary situations and does a reasonably good job. But it can't begin to tell you how you would behave in a totally novel, unusual situation. And the other problem is all of us say, I would never do it. I would never shock the puppy. I would never stalk that nice old guy. I would be a good guard. If I was in Abu Ghraib, I would resist all the things. We all think we are exceptional. And we are to our mothers. But we're not to the puppy and we're not to the prisoners. That, you know, and I keep saying the point is it's only by understanding how easily those people get seduced that you are in a position to be more invulnerable. It's when you say, no way, I can't go, that every con man, every cult recruiter has you in a minute. I mean, that's what we know. We know that because once you say I'm invulnerable, you think it's in you. And you become insensitive to all the little things. You get insensitive to the little handshake. How you doing? And as I'm shaking a hand, I'm moving it gradually. And as I move it gradually, I can get a sense. She's not resisting at all. If I shake a hand and I try to move it, she does it. So I'm going to say, no, not her. I'm going to go to this other one. So, I mean, there's 1,000 techniques that con men use, that cult recruiters use, that pitch men use. And they work on people, especially who think, no way, not me. Because then you put up this armor of ignorance, rather than street smarts that say, you know, I could be had, and therefore I got to be cool. I got to, you know, each situation I got to say what's safe, what's not safe, who can I trust, who can I trust, rather than I can't trust anybody or I can trust everyone. You got a question?
Yes, my question is sort of related to the one asked from this microphone a moment ago. I'm thinking about the quote that you put up toward the end. It was
Solzhenitsyn?
Mora, I think.
Oh yeah, Navy Attorney General Alberto Mora.
Now it sounds as if he was intending that statement to sort of acknowledge the fact that there is awareness of the danger to the Constitution and the principles of our, supposedly the principles of our society, represented by this kind of activity. But I'm wondering whether there's a conscious utilization of that knowledge from the Stanford study, from the Milgram study, and from others, and whether one could make a case that there is actually a deliberate program of using vulnerable operatives, in effect, the prison guards, as part of a sort of concerted program. I saw your interview with Amy Goodman a couple of days ago, last Friday, I guess it was, on Democracy Now! For anybody interested, that's at democracynow.org. They have archives of that interview.
I didn't know. I look at it.
Yeah. Okay. And as you probably know, I mean, part of her broader agenda is to look critically at the Iraq invasion and occupation. I'm wondering whether you know of anyone who's actually looking at this kind of activity at places like Abu Ghraib and others as a way of sort of demonstrating what this whole program is really all about.
No, it's a very good question. See, the interesting thing is, until recently, psychologists had the sense that nobody cared about what we did. That, you know, you do a study, you publish it, you talk about it, and it gets dumped in a well. I mean, seriously. I mean, the prison study, like the Milgram, was just fascinating because people said, gee, I didn't think so many people could do such a bad thing. Or, you know, and that was it. We had no idea that it could be used or was being used or is being used at a higher level, really to corrupt people, to undercut people. So this is new. I mean, I've only just discovered this in the last 6 months, essentially writing the book. And we don't really know the extent to which it's being used. We don't know the extent to which it's some psychology graduate students who took social psychology, you know, at Yale from Milgram, at Stanford from me, that you know, is working for the military, you know, putting this stuff into action. I think at this point we just don't really have a clue about the depth at which psychological knowledge, sociological knowledge, business school knowledge is being used by the Pentagon, by the Bush administration. So Alberto Mora is, he's just saying, he's revolted in seeing how, you know, our government could sponsor soldiers to do this terrible thing. What's really worse is the Military Commissions Act, which was recently passed by Congress, pushed by Bush, suspends 200 years of Anglo-American law. It says anyone who is labeled an unlawful enemy combatant, an American citizen as well as foreigners, can be arrested without a charge, can be held indefinitely, meaning your entire life, with no habeas corpus, with no right to a lawyer, no charge against you. And legal scholars are saying, Jenny Martinez, legal scholar at Stanford, said, this is a poison chalice. This undoes the whole history of American law. I mean, that is, you know, it's what our democracy is all about. And Congress passed it without an argument. I don't even think they read it. That there could be nothing worse. He's just talking about, Alberto Mora, how horrible it is the way we torture somebody. This law says the government, our government, can arrest anybody anywhere in the world, including Scio, Ohio, say he's an enemy non-combatant, and we disappear him for as long as we want. And he's got no right to anything that every American citizen believes you have a right to. And where is the outrage? I mean, nothing is worse than that. You know, that is worse than the Abu Ghraib thing. That's worse than going to war in Iraq. That changes what America's about. We would make fun of foreign countries if we said, you know what, in this country, in Turkey, in Egypt, look at the things they do. If we said it was there, we said, that's horrible. No, it's here now, and it's a law enacted in 2006. And again, I have the background, and Lucifer, I have the background of how that law came to be. And I think nobody knows about it. I mean, congressmen signed off without reading the damn thing. You had a question?
Thank you.
I think we have 5 more minutes.
There's a phrase.
We have to keep shorter questions, short answers. I get too involved.
There's a phrase that unconditional power corrupts unconditionally.
Yeah.
In like a society like ours now, with America as the big superpower that it is, do you think there's any sort of hope in terms of creating a system that does sort of take these sort of things into account, that takes into these abuses of power? When there's all this power to be had, sort of.
Yeah, I mean, the key is, it's not even abuse of power, it's arrogance of power. I mean, that's really what I accuse, the current administration of. It's that, and it's really a carryover from Nixon era. It was the sense in which, we can do anything. Arrogance of power means I can do anything. If you read Camus' Caligula, Caligula wanted to demonstrate he had power, so he killed his best friend. He killed his wife. Because he had no reason to do. That's absolute power. And you demonstrate to people that this guy can do anything. Well, it's a little bit like Donald Trump, I mean, in a sense. But what we're saying is that our government, once you have the executive and the legislature and now buying out some of the Supreme Court, they said we could do anything and get away with anything. And it's only now, it's only because of the change in the legislature that you're even getting these investigative reports. And the worst is yet to come. Because once you think you're above the law, and that's what the arrogance of power is, that the law does not apply to me and us. We can do whatever we want, and they did. And that's what you're going to see coming out now with these reports. It's not that the Democrats are just lifting the lid. I mean, and what you're going to see is this terrible thing come out. So again, it's, we had the moment, when the Berlin Wall fell, and Russia dissolved, we had the moment to create world peace in a unique way, especially after 9/11. All of our enemies embraced us. At that moment, we could have transformed the world. We could have said, we can do anything we want, but we're not going. We're going to be humble. We're going to start schools. We're going to start, hospitals in place. We're going to start libraries. After Afghanistan, the first thing that happened in Kabul after the Taliban left, people took out their old 60mm projectors. Everybody came to look at the movies. We could have sent, what we did in the Second World War, we could have sent them movies, projectors. We could have transformed that. Instead, we sent bombs. We did a shock and awe campaign that we will never recover from. Probably not in our generation anyway. So yeah, I think it's still possible, but not, I don't want to be political, but not with an administration who thinks in those terms, thinks in terms of power. Yes? Or it might have to be the last one.
Thank you very much.
If you buy a book and come up, I can talk while I write. I'll multitask.
Thank you very much for kicking off the Passover season with this wonderfully enlightening talk. My question is, why is it that in this description in your talk, you have positioned yourself and what you're saying as in opposition to religious teachings, as different from the doctrine of sin, when, as I understand it, in both Jewish and Christian and Buddhist and no doubt other traditions, the entire notion of religious moral instruction is the assumption it is hard to be a good apple in a bad barrel, and that is why we hold individuals responsible for their conduct on a moral level, so that they will be motivated to carry their inoculation with them. That is why various religions instruct very specifically on Yashahara, on the nature of the besetting sin in Catholicism and the Eightfold Path in Buddhism. And these are teaching specifically to address the question of how it is that a person can remain a good person and not commit evil when being an apple in a bad barrel.
Right. Oh, but I never absolve personal responsibility. I mean, in the book I say in 27 places, understanding is not excuses. Psychology is not excusiology. Is that in Chip Frederick's case, the issue was only the sentence. He said he's guilty, he's ready to serve. I'm only saying that given the circumstances in which he operated, the way in which the military, the people who should have been protecting, not putting soldiers in harm's way, put him in harm's way. So my only defense, the situational defense, is never about is this person accountable? It's really, to what extent do we take the situation into account in judging the extent of the sentence? And secondly, if he goes on trial, then we have to put the people who created that situation on trial. So if you go to my website, lucifereffect.org, there is a virtual voting booth in which I put on trial George Tenet, head of the CIA, Rumsfeld, Cheney, and Bush. And I say, here are the charges against them. Here are the charges against them, and you vote. Guilty. Are they involved? Command complicity. Is that if these guys at the bottom, you know, got these terrible sentences, who are the people who created that? In the book, I describe in detail how they manipulated the law, how they sent these memos creating those conditions. And it's simply, the question is, the system is ultimately people in power, the top power. So if these young soldiers, and this guy I know, I'm saying he's a good apple, if he's rotting in prison, then my sense is, my outrage is, the people who created the condition that put him there, they also should be on trial. And so if you go to the website, you can vote one way or another. I think we have to end. I'm sorry. Please come up, and I'll be happy to talk to you.